Hey everybody, welcome again. Welcome to another essential conversation at Wellbeings. It's me and George back in the house.
Yes, man. Yes,
Uh,
yes. I'm glad to be here.
yeah, and today we're talking about codependency. It's been something that's been a hot potato in the therapeutic world that I work in, and it's been a real big subject this week. And we've got a lot of emails and texts to ask people for us to talk about it because it's so confusing. It's so there's a lot of concepts out there about what it is, like I suppose what it is to be in a healthy relationship, and codependency is definitely not a healthy relationship. It's, for me, from a depth perspective, I see codependency is a way that we can avoid our aloneness and at the same time are disconnected from ourselves, on a certain level. But it's like a circular relationship where somebody needs the other person, and the other person needs to be needed. There's some sort of like a really unhealthy sort of dynamic where there's overextension, there's overcompensating, there's a way in which you're kind of trapped in it, there's a way in which you can't breathe, there's a way in which there's no boundaries, there's a way in which you start to not think for yourself. You allow other people's thinking to override your feelings and your behaviors, and so it's a real quagmire of interesting subject that we're going to dive into today. So yeah, let's sit back and get some popcorn and get a cup of tea and let's get into it. So George, codependency. When did you start to understand that in your clinical journey? Or
Well, it's something that you learn back in college, but after you graduate and get into the field,
Mhm.
some many trainings, and you start learning about how that affects people's ability to function normally, to build relationship in a healthy way. So you understand how that affects the population in general. So codependency is a very major issue. It's a condition. It's a learning behavior in which the condition the person is feeling is preventing the person to build a healthy relationship, and that's something that I think is very important. And we're gonna dive into it and see how that affects people and what can be done when it comes to the codependency. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so let's pull right back. Let's look at like how it's formed in the first place. Where do we start learning about codependency?
Well, let's learn behavior, and you've seen it in your family interaction with family. For example, let's say that you have an alcoholic father,
Mhm.
and then you feel that you have the need to take care of that father,
Mhm.
and interactions with your husband or spouse, for example, the way you see your mom is being dealing with your dad, and
Mhm.
if there are some kind of domestic violence and so on and so forth. You grow up in the environment and learn about codependency.
Mhm.
So these conditions when you've been nurtured over a year,
Mhm.
it allows you to, or preventing you from building a healthy relationship, whether it's love relationship, whether friendship, whether it's relationship with your boss, work. So all these have some kind of impact in how you deal with things.
I I come from Ireland, and there's like people are celebrated when they're in codependent relationships. I'm thinking of the stereotypical mother who's selfless, who doesn't have a sense of self. Her whole world is about giving to others and overextending, and then but at the same time she's overextending, but she's deeply depressed inside. But if you would ask her how she feels, she says, they would say, no, I'm okay, I'm fine. Or it's this, I'm seeing all these different women that I saw at different stages of my life, and where they would be celebrated. Oh, she's got such a big heart. Yeah, she's got a big heart of giving to others, but she's not actually receiving
Not
herself.
receiving anything. You're not
Yeah.
receiving anything. You're giving, or receive anything. And the thing here is the person's what drives the person affected by the codependency
Mhm.
is the feeling that I'm needed.
Yeah.
I'm needed. So I'm doing this. You know what? I know my husband is not alcoholic, but he's believing. But if I leave him,
Mhm.
who's gonna take care of him? So I have to stay. So this is where the codependency becomes very uh, hurtful, and it's something that you start to paying attention to. Yeah,
Yeah,
it can
like
be very scary.
it's a really beautiful subject. Like I like that, like how to understand. You know, I remember in a group maybe 7 years ago. It really stands out right now. It was a mixed group, and we asked a woman to talk about her relationship with her husband, and she was she says, yeah, well, it's an amazing relationship. I go and I make sure he has his socks ready in the morning. I make sure that he's got the right suit there. I make sure it's there for him. Nighttime when he comes home, I make she confused love with being needed.
Most of the time, this when you okay, you've been neglected, and by the person that you could, you neglect yourself, your own feelings, your own needs. People with have a high level of low self-esteem. I don't know if that makes any sense. So the self-esteem, the self-image, and the way they perceive themselves very low, and therefore they have to compensate by doing extra. If at work they will be the last person to leave, and they would go be above and beyond. And this is in every aspect of their lives. And at the same token, they are miserable. And when they don't have that, also, it is a problem. So that can be very crucial.
Yeah, I like that. I like that when you use the word self-esteem, because what I see in codependency is where they are esteemed in the other.
Yeah.
There's a sort of the sense of self that normally resides within the being is residing within the other, whether it's the carer, the lover, the boss, the mother, whoever it is. And it's like, it's a way to, and it's really seductive when it goes well.
Yeah, when it goes well, but most of the time it doesn't go well. Because not most of the time, it usually it's something wrong. It's a condition that really could be very, very hurtful. So you could perceive it in a way from the outside in, but internally it's not really working, and you're prone to hurt and you're prone to abuse. A lot of times people in the codependent relationship, they are really abused, whether it's emotionally, whether it's sexually, whether it's financially, psychologically. There are a lot of hurt and there are a lot of abuse when it comes to it. So that's a very
the internal structure is not developed yet. It feels like they use the structure of the overextension with other people as a way to pseudo distract themselves from the torment inside, and at the same time collude with more suffering in the long term.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of depressions there when it comes to it. They're very depressed a lot of times. They want to stay home. They don't want to be involved. And so they cried a lot and so on and so forth. But however, they always look for that thrive they have, that drive they have in doing something. Oh, now I'm so worthless. If I do this, I will be seen. If I do this, I would feel that I'm worth something. So I'm gonna go above and beyond just to show, just to compensate that hole that I have inside of me. So codependent is very, very.
Yeah, man. As I see that, and as I feel that in my body, there's like this thing, and I want the viewer here to feel into this for a minute to see if this resonates for you, because I think it's very. It may touch you, it may not, but it's like, do you live in the world where you feel that you are loved for what you do or loved for who you are? Like that's the difference. And how you kind of, it's almost like you're in a work camp your whole life trying to be more to get filled, that never really ever gets filled. And then you get resentful towards the world, that the world doesn't give you what you want because you're overextending and expecting the same thing to come back, and it doesn't come back.
Exactly. And that's why sometimes one of the best way we approach codependency is to dive into the person's childhood. There are a lot of trauma sometimes that should relate to codependence. Kids in divorce relationship, for example. You could develop some level of codependency depending on how bad the whole break. That doesn't mean that every kid or divorce they could. That's not what we're saying. But you see some of those things happen within those kind of relationship, in abusive domestic violence relationship, you dive into the childhood of the kid, you might find some psychodynamically, you might find some issues that they've been dealing with her entire life.
Yeah, man, you used the word psychodynamic. I think I remember one time we were in a sort of psychodynamic group. Again, the same thing, but the old style of acting out those behaviors and watching everybody else getting impacted. But one of the things as well that I think is really important, like, you know, the difference between the seduction of displaying to the world versus revealing to the world. And what I mean by that is when you're in a state of displaying, there's a way in which you're trying to get you're trying to, like codependency, it's a very lonely road because you're not revealing yourself. It's like, here's all the things I can do to make you love me, to make you feel better, to make me feel better, but you don't know who I am. So I think there's a sort of haunting of loneliness because of the display of the codependent versus the revealing of the true struggle, the depression, the helplessness, the deep despair that can reside in it.
It is a very lonely road, and that's why they are doing so much just to feel fulfilled in what they do. They would go to the extremes and even accept abuse and accept certain things that are not supposed to be accepted in the first place from whomever they are depending on, whether it's a friend who's mistreating them anyhow, or a group of friends that would mistreat them, but they would accept that abuse just to feel belong. A husband was mistreating them, they would still go through the abuse just to feel loved and belong. A child was actually, kids can be very abusive towards parents, especially teenagers, and as they go into the transition and getting older, they could be very, very, very aggressive.
Kickbacks.
And then let's say that they're in that relationship where the husband left, or when they were kids, their mothers were divorced and they went through hell and back. Now they are in a situation where they don't want to relieve the same thing that they did as a kid. Now they start being dependent on this kid's affection. You see, and then even when the child is misbehaving in certain way, they accept that. I've seen kids slap their mom. I've seen kids spit in the face of their parents, but they will take that in because of the dependence they have to feel that, okay, I'm a great mother. I'm going above and beyond. And they would deny, they would give all sorts of rationalization, all sorts of intellectualizations just to justify their behavior, which is totally unrealistic and wrong.
Yeah, you'll stay in a state of starvation, and you'll take what you can get, and you'll shape it a certain way and make it okay. I think that's a really nice, and it's a really confronting thing to feel into. As I'm a parent, and when the kids are young, sometimes there's the kid with the mother. I've seen it where that's all there is. That happens, and it's different than when they're young.
No, it's different.
But I remember when I had a clinic in Dublin, I saw that take place. I saw a 8 or a 12-year-old kid, kicking his mom, and the mom just like saying, "Yeah, it's okay," and like, wow, like as you frame that right now, like, yeah, like there was a sort of starvation in her life somewhere where she was again allowing a particular type of behavior under the guise of this is a good mothering.
A lot of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Okay, long story. If I correct that child or stop him, he won't love me anymore, then I would be a bad mother. Everything is going to be okay as long as I love him. He could do whatever he wants to do. I just want to feel that I'm a good mother, and a good mother means that my kids love me. But in truth, they don't.
Yeah, wow. Like I remember the word of like one of my teachers that I really look up to. He's a psychoanalyst called Adam Phillips, and he talks about we're living in an era in the world today where the parents are scared of their kids. They're scared of their emotions. They do everything they can to appease that because of their own relationship with their own emotions, which is a complete codependent setup.
Very painful. Very painful. That happens a lot. And I've seen that in my practice. I've seen that throughout my years in practicing psychology. It happens even the seminars and workshops that we attended, talking about talking about codependency. You've seen it, and it's something that is real, and sometimes people don't realize that. You'd be surprised to see how many people codependent when it comes to interrelationship between persons, between men and women, men and men and women and women, human to human. So these are very, very important issues to understand. There is a psychological condition in there. There is a learned behavior. There is an abnormality when it comes to that. The extremes that you have, that you go, the extreme behaviors, the extreme feelings, in everything. So you could see the abnormality in that interaction, and sometimes it could be very toxic. And taxing as well upon people around you, because the codependent person is have some kind of unsatiated need for acceptance, for love, or for recognition, and they would go to the extremes and accept the abuse. They accept the unacceptable when it comes to their interactions with other people. It's a very, very sad situation when you look into it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's so normalized. It's just the way it is. Like as I hear you talk, I kind of feel in my body just the reality of like when the system fails. When the family environment is non-responsive, whether it's the parents or whether of the parents or whatever it is, where there's no space to individuate. You follow the sort of survival rules, which is you conform, and there's a way that you morph into shutting down in some way or performing in some way and modeling what you see that, okay, well, she's surviving, so I'll do the same thing. So it's really important to look at the structure, the structure of the family, and to be kind of honest about it. And I'm going to be honest as well. Like, I had to work through my codependency. I remember a time I was in a relationship where I was the problem. I was the problem for my girlfriend, and I was the solution of my girlfriend's pain. Wow. Like that was that. Imagine that for and I think, and I want to echo here, we're therapists, but we're terribly human as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what makes us good therapists, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm very, and I share a lot around my ordinariness as a therapist. I suppose that's what's needed, I suppose. But yeah, I remember the torture that was. I remember how compelling it was, how seductive it was to, on one hand, just collapse into the pain of being the cause of another person's pain, and at the same time the seduction of being able to fix it, to make it better for them. Yeah. Absolutely. And that whole whoa. It was probably, when that was in full flow, I couldn't feel myself. I was like a ghost. I was like this version of myself where I needed to kind of, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing anything at that time, but I was depressed. I was on the road to recovery, but I remember that time instinctively well, and I remember walking a lot. And slowly, and I wasn't able to see it. This was just, I was just replaying stuff that I saw, and I remember, again, for those out there, if you're in a relationship and you feel that you're the cause of your partner's pain and the solution to it, reach out for help. There's something problematic with that. There's something terribly painful, and that you can't find your way through it by yourself. But yeah, another rendering around that is this need to please, this need to please, wow. I remember when I was in my 20s and I started off in a little disco dance journey of being a masseuse. I was massaging from very young. I couldn't accept any goddamn payment because I didn't have enough self-worth to believe that somebody would want to pay me for my time. So I was it was so confrontational that somebody saw me and wanted to offer payment. It took me a year to be able to receive payment. That's where I was, and that's not the case now. But so these are all the different things, like how little we think of ourselves, how, another flavor of codependency is having no boundaries, having no self-worth, having a lot of self-critical iterations, and sort of, just really wow, like, just where you don't kind of exist, in a way only to serve other people.
To serve other people, to please other people. You're a constant pleaser. You would go above and beyond. You would neglect yourself. You would neglect things that are very important in your life in order to please somebody else. And then codependent people cannot say no. They have a problem saying no.
Yeah.
They cannot say no to other people. And you find yourself in this kind of situation, you have to start questioning and reaching out to professionals that could help you, because there are, there are many ways we could deal with that. There are many ways we could cure that. There are approaches that we take in order to deal with this kind of psychological condition. So don't feel that ashamed, and don't feel that it's a problem for you to reach out, because this could destroy your life. This could really have a major impact on yourself, but other people, because the person that you're codependent upon also feeling the burden, because sometimes you could feel suffocated. Okay, when the person just like, you could feel suffocated. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship.
Oh yeah,
with a codependent personality where you can't even breathe, because it just a major. And then at the same token, you don't want to, refuse that, because that person's gonna go, erratic on you, and because feeling hurt and cried and feel depressed and all sort of things as a result. So it's a very, very major issue, though.
Yeah, and it sets up the thing I said at the beginning, like, you don't feel your own aloneness. That's a payoff, but you don't feel yourself, which is the problem.
And the fear, as you mentioned alone, I said the fear of being alone. And this is one of the biggest things also with codependence, is the fear of being alone, fear of an inability for you to fulfill your dream without having somebody to help you. And that is
would you say it's also like an oral fixation as well, where there's a sort of like an oral wound in there, where you're suspended almost in the child state, where there's sort of this dependency of the pseudo mother in a way?
To some extent, yes, you could see that. Pseudo mother, you could see the very motherly,
or the father,
and probably whatever. And you could see that also, because that doesn't mean that you can nurture somebody who could be nice, but you're gonna see the problem because it's vivid. We can see the person, undergo certain abuse, very, and they still would hanging in there and not even responding to the abuse. They're not assertive. As a matter of fact, they don't feel that they should be assertive, and they diminish their own assertiveness just to please to somebody. So codependency is a major issue, and it's more prominent than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's like, and I, it's like, I don't, some of my clients say, I want to come and work with my codependency, and I'd say, okay, cool, but it's such a big thing, it's like there's so many other parts to it, but it's like so important to be able to, as I'm still stuck with something you said there, just this, and remembering how it was so true for me, was whenever I was able to sit with my aloneness, whenever I was able to sit with the pain, and when I was able to allow someone to accompany me in my aloneness, instead of me trying to avoid my aloneness by the codependency. It was really a pivotal period of time where I was able to be with this part of myself. It started to shape myself, where I had started the foundations of the scaffolding of building the sort of the solid sense of self, where I didn't need to get it as much from my my sort of Peter Pan-esque behavior. I was like Peter Pan. Like, think about that sort of archetype, running around. I know I didn't used to wear nice stockings, but running around, but like being the jester, being the clown, being everything that everybody wanted, that I thought I needed to be
just to please them.
The seduction.
You forget yourself, forget about yourself. You forget about, as you mentioned earlier, your self-worth. What you're worth. You forget about what you deserve, just to please people. Just like somebody in a bullying relationship, where we go to those abuse and accept it just because I don't want to lose that friendship. I don't want to lose him. He's the best person in my entire life. I don't want to lose her. He's the best person. As a matter of fact, if I'm not here for him, if I'm not here for her, he will be miserable. She will be miserable. In fact, that is the other way around.
Do you think this is something that's also very prevalent? Again, anybody out there who's dealing with resentment, I think resentment is something that cooks onto the table for everybody at either side. When you're overextending, resentment comes after a while if it's not coming back in the same way.
You could have something of resentment, but resentment to whom?
Either the self or the other. Of course, the self is getting battered, but then also,
most of the time it's the self.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I didn't do it enough. Maybe it's my fault. Why do I do that? Why do I stick with him too much? Why do I ask for much? It's my fault.
I don't need as much.
It's most likely with the self.
Yeah. And what I saw sometimes was, this place, especially in the groups, where the codependency would play out, which it has to play out. Like, and I do believe you bring a group of people together, each person's dynamic will eventually play out if they feel safe. And it's a very wonderful dynamic I remember a group that I had in person here, and this woman would come to the group, and it was actually a residential group program, and so we'd all be sitting around in a circle, and then this woman said, "Anybody? Okay, I'm going to the fridge. What do you need? Do you need this? Do you need that? Do you need this? Okay, what do you want? Do you want some green juice? Do you want some watermelon juice?" And she'd do this every day, and then the group turned around and said to her, "Hey, we don't need you to be more for you to be amongst us, to be with us." And to have that lived experience was just such a different reality, because this woman had done this her whole life, and she had watched her mother do it her whole life. And she thought that's what life was to be in service and to be selfless.
And again, there's a fine line. I don't want you to think that, okay, you cannot be nice. I don't want you to think that you cannot be courteous to people, or you have to be mean. Is that what we're talking about here?
It's when that's all there is.
But there is, and you feel the need that insatiable need to please people, even when that is not being returned, even when that is not being acknowledged, even when you've been abused by your kindness, you still feel the need, that void to do that, where you're not looking at yourself, your self-worth, and your self-esteem and what you deserve. And that's where the problem lies. Not when you're being okay, everybody could be nice to people. The first day, for example, taking your client as an example, it's fine the first day. She's like, this is courteous, this is really good. But when you want to do that every single day,
it was 3 times a day.
2 times a day. Then you start being modeling. That starts being questionable. I have a young kid that I recently met in a school, and then the teacher was telling me that this kid, is a 10-year-old, he brought a box of all of his toys to share with all the students in the school for them to like him. Okay, he feels that he has to give them stuff to feel belong, and this is really major. And I didn't have a chance to intervene, and the teacher took the box and tried to really share those toys. But it just really sits with me that something is wrong there, and I'm sure that I'm gonna see them next week, and I'm gonna really try to highlight that there's a problem here. I mean, I use a big box of all sort of toys, and he said that literally. He told the teacher, I want to give them toys so they could be my friends.
Wow. Like, remember the old saying that most parents say all the time, be a good child. You're not, just be good for mommy, just be good for daddy, which elicits that you're not good unless you perform well, or you perform.
And that's why I don't never use that terms. Even in therapy, I always advise parents, you don't say you're good or bad to your kids. There's no such thing as good or bad kids. That doesn't exist. The kids may behave badly, or the kids may behave good, or acceptable, appropriately. So the behavior is what is wrong, not your child is being bad, because being bad doesn't mean it's really oblivious to a kid, or you tell a kid, "Oh, be good," but be good could mean anything. Be good could mean, okay, you touching my phone and I punch you in the face. That's being good to me.
Okay.
So it could be anything. So when these kids are internalizing those things, getting older, well, then you might find some kind of behaviors, and if there are some kind of layers in the household, and as I mentioned earlier previously, codependency is a learned behavior.
Yeah.
It's a learned behavior, and that passed from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Okay, this is something that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that about the good or bad child because at such a young age, that young child had to learn that from somewhere. He had to learn that he had to be more to be.
But of course, they'll learn behaviors. You model the kid. You mold the kid into the citizen or the person that the kid is out to be. That's why when I'm doing therapy with small kids, I spend a lot of time with the parents, because you are the one shaping the first, like as they say, the first 5 years last forever. So this is a fact. You could make or break a kid in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
These are very critical. They're very crucial in child development. So what you put there and how you raise your kid, the interaction, your own behavior around the kid, and what you're teaching the kid. Sometimes you don't say, okay, well, do what I say, don't do what I do. No. They will do what you do.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
And it's like, again, if parents are watching here, and this is something that you're noticing, that you may have these traits. Now, to be honest with you, there's very few people who don't have these. There's like the codependency, the demands we have on our kids, the demands we have on ourselves, expectations. But the thing here is like there's kids model who you are first, then they model your behavior second, but who you are inside, and this sort of learned ways of being, these sorts of ways that we, as I think of Winnicott and his dance with the good enough parent. This is not about you being some like Jedi Knight sort of parent. This is, as parents, like, it's like, for me as a parent, what helps me be a good enough parent is getting support, talking about the struggles of being a parent, talking about, asking people's, sort of, sharing the sort of the difficulties of this unknown landscape for me, because it's my first child. And to be able to be humble enough to be able to allow myself to come towards the other, and to come towards a therapist, and to come towards peers, and to come towards friends, and let go of a render that I have it sorted just because I'm a therapist. So this really helps me in an ordinary way be a good enough parent.
Absolutely. And this is a good thing I like about you, when you always be candid about your own experience and very transparent. It's a very powerful testimony as for you as a therapist, when this is disclosed in the most appropriate way that could help somebody. Because we have to understand, as therapists, we are human and we're not perfect. We learn just like everybody else. As a matter of fact, I learn more when I'm doing therapy. Sometimes I learn a lot from my own clients, more you could possibly imagine. So the only difference here is we're trained to see and detect certain things, and to navigate through certain things better than others, because that's what we do. That's what we train for. We have that training to do it. But on a human level, we make mistakes like everybody else. We struggle like everybody else. I mean, I'm still struggling with so many issues that you could possibly imagine in terms of parenting or relationship with my own child. These are very hurtful things that you give people advice, but sometimes it's really challenging. So the reason why we're saying that is for you to understand that we're not coming here and preaching you as if we are the perfect one here. That doesn't exist. There's no book that's written, okay, this has to be a parent, okay? But what we do and what we try to convey to you, that, okay, celebrate our limitations and then seek for support. And sometimes I confide in you. You come and say, George, you know what? Hey, I have a child. This is what I would do. And you do the exact same thing for me. I remember the first time we made it. George, I want you to take a look at this one. That's what we do. We support each other. We confide in each other the same way that we're doing for you as a client. And then we're not telling you anything that we want to experience. This is the real deal right here, though.
Yeah, man. Again, I think I say this in every goddamn podcast, but we can't do life by ourselves. We need people, to do it well. We need people in our families. And this is another thing with codependency. I think sometimes codependency also births isolation, and like isolation and everything that falls under that umbrella of guilt, shame, doubt, sort of keeping secrets, all this stuff. As they open that goddamn door, it was the best thing I ever did. It's just that someone come on in here, and shame multiplies in the darkness. It's like fucking mushrooms. It grows in the dark. But when you let that out, it's like it's so refreshing to get support. I suppose I'm saying this because I understand the toxic shame and guilt that's held in family systems and family units, that they don't want to let anybody in sometimes to take a look.
But just stereotype as well.
Yeah.
As if like, okay, if you seek for help, that means something is wrong with you. I mean, generally what I tell people, the very first disclosure when people come to my office is that I never treated a crazy person in my entire life. That doesn't exist. I don't know what it means. When you're talking about, okay, crazy, that doesn't exist. That isn't part of our vocabulary.
Yeah.
So if you have a friend and you talk to a friend, especially you raising kids, or maybe you experience codependency while we're talking here, you could examine and say, well, maybe I see some of the traits in my own behavior, in some of the quote unquote BS that I'm taking in for years, some of the abuses that I'm taking in for years, and I don't know why I'm still here. I don't know why I'm still taking this on. Now you start checking yourself. This is when you start reaching for help. This is when you call somebody, so they could help you to navigate through this, because there are certain things you cannot resolve alone. Okay.
And I think this is another reason why, through lots of pushing from clients and groups that I'm in, why we birthed this podcast in the first place, was to really take the stigma out of mental health issues, where it's like we all need help at some stage in our life. And just because we need help doesn't mean we're broken, doesn't mean we're damaged goods. It means that it helps, it helps refine our shining in the world. It helps us remember to come back online, where we can get to have more sort of growth, more development, more connection, more nourishment, maybe more enrichment, and then also to be able to navigate the ordeals of life, ups and downs and ins and outs, where we can get support for that. So again, these essential conversations at Wellbeings is really about letting them know it's okay to reach out, and nothing's unfixable, and that you can't do it by yourself. And again, this sort of thing around, so as I'm thinking about, it originates within the family structure, whether it's generations being handed down, like hand-me-downs, or it's just happening for whatever reason. What is the steps now? Let's say somebody's watching and they're saying, okay, well, I'm noticing I have have some of these traits. What would be I know there's like hundreds and thousands of different ways we can approach it.
Of course.
But what would be some general things?
The first thing for the person who's acknowledged that is not to be self-treated. Call somebody. This is the first thing. Call a professional.
Yeah.
Call somebody, because not everybody could diagnose codependence. Okay, not everybody could diagnose codependence. Yeah. So you don't lie to yourself, or just try to say, okay, I'm going to self-medicate.
In Ireland, we are got such a great way to deny stuff. Oh, he's not an alcoholic, he just likes a wee drink. Or he's not an alcoholic, he's just lots of fun. Or no, she's not a codependent, she's just got a big heart.
A big heart, yeah. Exactly. That's right.
Oh, she's the perfect mother. It's like, she takes care of all my shit. Like, she's amazing. She doesn't have any problems. So there is a stage of denial that's there, because of course the seduction of being validated with codependency.
Oh, absolutely. And then you have people, enforcing that as well, and taking advantage of that as well, and then, milk it as much as they could. But if you, have the little shining lights just sparks, and that tells you, look, maybe there's something here.
Oh.
Yeah. Please reach out to a professional, reach out to somebody. And then the first thing, there are ways we're going to get into it to understand where the blockage, where the blockades are, what's been happening, what had happened
Mhm.
to you, perhaps in your childhood, or maybe as an adult, where you've learned this behavior of being codependent and how that is affecting you, how that is affecting people around you, and
Mhm.
what you could do when you identify that. You can start removing those things. You
Mhm.
can start to change and reshape your perception, your thought process. That's why I love cognitive therapy.
Mhm.
It's thinking, feeling, and acting. This is three layers when it comes to it.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
different approach than I know deeply, but I know a little bit about it. But I love that how you've presented it there.
It's simple. It's really this is cognitive therapy. You think, you feel, and you act. Period.
Mm.
It's very simple. And if you can do that, this is when you're gonna start the process of healing.
Mhm. Nice.
Whether it's to depression, whether it's PTSD, whatever
Mm.
it is, and codependence is one of the things. You have to first of all identify the problem, okay, and then you think your approach, your
Mhm.
thinking, your thinking cap, okay, how you perceive things, how you perceive life.
Mhm.
You could either make yourself feeling good, or
Mhm.
by depending how you approach it or how you think of things.
Okay.
So now, when you could shift that, of course you're gonna feel differently, and when you feel differently, you're gonna act differently.
Yeah, I like
Is
that.
that simple?
I like that schedule. You know, that sort of structure. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's the basic structure of
Mhm.
cognitive therapy.
Yeah, and like your experience of I think of Freud when he says like when you have this like sort of constant what's his word he uses he says just this undulating presence of awareness as you observe the client. What have you observed for the client who breaks through this structure of codependency? How is it for them? What sort of a journey is it that you notice that starts to take place in them? What I mean is, it's not something that's super easy, but it's something that's worthwhile.
Mhm.
What do you see as some of the sort of dynamics that you see that happen whenever people start shifting that sort of structure, that template?
Well, it's very like any other disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard because you're talking about changing the pattern of the brain, the thought process, and the behavior of somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it can be very painful.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a lot of guilt associated with it. There's a lot of shame associated with it, and sometimes acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Accepting that something is broken, and when the person starts revealing that, okay, whoa,
Uh-huh.
look at how I've been, the time that I've wasted, and how much people have been taking advantage of me, and all the stuff, you could get into a state of depression. Okay, so you really have to take this very, very, very smoothly, step by step, to allow the person the process, and the person to actually retrieve himself or herself.
I like that.
And build forward in life. So this is it's a whole process, but it's worthwhile. It's worth taking those steps and to navigate through those steps, because sometimes it's going to be painful, sometimes it's going to be okay, but as you're making the steps, you're going to feel empowered. Every step you take, you're going to see you feel empowered, because you're going to literally remove those blockages. Okay, you're going to, for example, you're going to learn to say no.
Wow.
You're not going to be a pleaser all the time. Somebody called you 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not an emergency. It's not something or left life or death. And then it's something that could stay the next day. And you have your kids next to you, with your husband. You said, no, I'm sorry. I cannot help you now. It's okay to say that.
Yeah. Who's listening, who struggles with saying no? Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
I
remember one of the things, the exercise that they had us, they made us do when I was in college. The professor had us stood, and then for about 30 seconds, just to say no out loud. No, because we could not. We find out a lot of students could not say no, and they had to say no because it's really relieving. It's really releasing. It's very empowering. That word no is very important, because believe it or not, the person you said no to may be upset, but one guarantee I'll give you: they'll respect you. That's a guarantee they will respect you, because you're not doing something that you don't want to do. And when you said yes, people know that you said yes. But when you said no, then you said no. And it's okay to say no. It's very, very good, because it causes a lot of stress. Because when you keep on pleasing and saying no, and then somebody calls you to be at a party, but you want to feel you feel that you want to stay home. But say, you know what? I took a rain check. I can't go tonight. Okay, you don't have to feel guilty. You don't
Mhm.
have to feel ashamed because you feel like staying home and you don't want to go to that party. You don't want to be around people today or tonight.
And
And
but
it's okay to have some me time.
and
And if you go, I don't want to coach you, but if you go, you're not gonna be happy. You're gonna be miserable. You're gonna a lot of stress. So go ahead.
yeah, and exactly, you may do that, but then you may also still feel guilt and shame, and that's okay too, because it's a new thing. It's a new landscape. I remember this old timer, and he taught me the art of saying no. And it plays out often as a therapist who lives in a small town. And I remember being in a sauna, and I'm like on my day off, I'm chilling, I'm like recuperating, I'm nourishing myself. I'm in a place of self-care at this moment. So I'm not in the space of helping anybody other than nourishing myself. And then comes a client, and she says, Nigel, I've just broke up with my husband. And so the art of saying no is yes, no, yes. For those who want to learn how to do it. So yes is I hear you. You have this need. No, I'm not available to help you right now. And yes, maybe we can talk about it later. And that instance, I said you can call my secretary to see if there's availability. But it's that yes, no, yes. Yes, I hear you. No, I'm not available. And yes, okay, we can see if it can happen again in the future, if that's a possibility. And I remember, like, for me, it was so hard to say no. It was so hard to have a sort of a grounded sense of myself where I had that. It felt like having a boundary like that meant that I was mean. I was like I was a bad person. But
And that's the feeling, right?
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
real. Like people who are codependent and don't have any boundaries, then when you start to set boundaries, you will feel as if you're being mean or being a bitch.
And you might find people that makes you feel that way.
Yeah.
You might find people that make you feel that way because they want to take advantage of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and they'll let you know about it. But yeah, so it's so back to what you were sharing there is, yeah, you can say no. And sometimes what comes with the newness of saying yes to self, because when you say no to the other, you're saying yes to you. With that newness, you may feel guilt and shame, but it's just something you have to go through. Acknowledge that it's there. Don't let it beat you up. You don't have to wear it like a tracksuit. You can just say, okay, that part's there, and talk about it with friends or with a therapist. And then slowly you get used to being able to say yes to self and no to that dynamic.
And what you really feel is not really guilt. You just feel bad because you have the tendency, you've been doing this so long.
That's what you're used to.
Pleasing people. And you feel in a different territory. So, this is new to me. I'm not used to this territory before. But in the heart of your heart, you feel good.
Yeah. It's like,
you really feel good.
It feels like, and it's something I'm looking forward to. I'm trying to get home to Ireland for the new year, but I want to get a new pair of shoes. So it's like coming out of this is like getting into some new shoes. Yeah. Damn it, it's like it feels uncomfortable because the things are cutting the backs of your heel, but it's like it feels good that you're giving yourself this something. It's like it's like coming out of a dynamic. It feels good, but it doesn't feel good at the beginning. And then eventually it starts to feel good as you get used to it.
As you get used to it. I mean, I never, I couldn't say no either. It's not, I never used to say no until they made me. I think that professor actually did that. Had a student, and then we said no and out loud, and hearing yourself saying no. Sometimes you never. It's very strange, when you never said no, and so that you don't even hear yourself ever saying that. So for the first time, I hear myself saying no, and then I tried, and somebody was, I don't remember exactly what it was, and I said no, I'm sorry, and I couldn't, and I went home and I felt so good. That's good. Yeah. And you know what? You fear, and the fear is if you said no, maybe that person's not gonna like you anymore. Maybe the dynamic's going to change. Maybe the person's not gonna be your friend anymore. Guess what? No, it is. If that person is your friend, he's still gonna be your friend. And if he's that true friend, he's still gonna be your friend.
And if he's not, you gotta
let it go. If it's not, then he was not to be. He was not meant to be because the person is just taking it. They have to be able to respect you and your choice. If you said no, that doesn't make you a bad person. And if you cannot say that, maybe you're not that much of a good friend. You have to respect that boundary, expect that, and we don't have to be so upset. We don't have to be, we don't have to break up just because I said no. Okay, and you can respect that, and because when you don't respect that, you know what happens when you keep on saying yes, 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 you're a yes man or yes woman, and what's happening here is you become like a remote control. They flip your channels whenever they want.
Wow, I like that. I don't like it, but I like the analogy. Wow,
that's what they do, because they could click. Okay, let's go to a party. Click. Okay, let's go to eat. Click. I'm coming to your house. Click. I need you now, and they keep on changing your state. You keep on changing yours. I mean, now at this point, you are under control, because you cannot stand your ground and say, "Oh no, it's a honey man. I mean, I understand, but I can't." And I feel so good. I mean, now I said more no than I said yes, because listen, if I don't feel like doing something, it's okay for me not to do it.
And that's when it's coming in direct. So sometimes these things come in and they're like kind of ulterior transactions. It's like you sit down on the sofa and you say, "Do you want something to eat?" Which really means you want something to eat. Do you ever, like where, like we do this all the time as humans, where we manipulate we have an ulterior, we say one thing, but we mean something else, and we elicit that experience in the other, so it's these sort of transactions all the time, like, it's like thousands of them that we go through all the time. And again, they can become very codependent and very manipulative. And again, it's like, it's these games that we play with one another. And it's like, for those of us, now we're heading towards the festive time of the year, where it's about family and it's about closeness and it's about togetherness, not merger into codependency. What would it be like to give yourself a gift for Christmas this year, where you can be individuated, where you can have your own separateness and still feel loved and together and close with the people who matter to you? What a wonderful gift that would be for the people who matter to you and for you moving forward into the new year. So that's something which, I'm with my clients, we try to orientate that at this time of the year, as a time that echoes closeness and togetherness and the struggle with it. I remember a friend of mine, he works in accident and emergency in Ireland, and it's the time in which on Christmas Day and Boxing Day is the day when it's the most busiest with family upsets and and family fights and feuds. And I know us talking about codependency may not target all of that dynamic over the Christmas, but when you can really honor what feels right for you, then you're not like a ticking time bomb inside.
Absolutely.
And then when you put alcohol and stuff into that as well, it doesn't really help. So like, really, as we move towards this festive time, like, love yourself, and start to, I suppose, loving yourself, in my opinion, is about sitting and getting in connection with yourself, and maybe even getting in connection and feeling stuff that doesn't feel good, but it's still parts of you. And maybe going to a therapist and getting help to do that, to learn how to do that, is really fundamental, as you said, as part of the process for helping people come back out of a codependent structure. And as we come to the end, I think, what do you feel, George, is something that you'd like to share about this codependent dance that we can get in, that people can get themselves into, that I have been in and that you have been in, that we've worked through and we're still working on it over this festive time? What feels important for people to remember?
First, remember, if you're not okay, nobody else is. If you're not okay, you can't make anybody okay.
Okay. Don't give out of a deficit, right?
No. So you have to be okay first. I remember when I have every year, I don't know where I get this from, for some reason, every year during my birthday, I sing happy birthday to myself first. Every year. I never wait for somebody to sing for me. I sing to myself every year first. Just so that I put that tape, I put that silver happy birthday. I sing myself, I dance, and I feel good. Now, somebody else could tell happy birthday to me, I said thank you. But I always said happy birthday to myself first. It's the same thing for the Christmas, for the
fill that cup.
For the holidays and then the New Year. Yeah, be okay first. Making sure that you're in that space first before you counting and thinking about gifts for somebody else. But give yourself, it doesn't have to be big, but give yourself something. Give yourself something and be proud of it. Spend some time with yourself. I promise you, by the time you're done, everybody's around you going to be very happy because you're happy with yourself first. You love yourself first. If you love yourself first, then you could love somebody else. There's no way you could love somebody if you don't love yourself enough.
Amen.
And love yourself first.
Wow.
That's it.
Now that's a roast beef dinner right there. That's a turkey and ham special, sitting to understand the journey of being able to sit and love the self, to be with all the parts of the self, and in equal measure, the sadness, the loneliness, the joy, the happiness, the hardships, the pain, learning to slow down and check in with that, and not demonize it, not make it bad, not make it wrong, not make you wrong or somebody else wrong. Just being able to sit with those feelings helps you deepen as a person, and then you can bring that enormity of your own good enoughness to the world and to the people who matter, as an individual, not as somebody who merges into this codependent sort of suffering. I call it a suffering dance.
It is.
Because it's that either sort of move, it creates a sort of prophecy of more pain and suffering, disconnection and loneliness, and a sort of habitual helplessness. So for everybody, that's our prayer. I think me and George are on the same page. Slow it down, check in with yourself. And through the checking in is loving, and give yourself something sweet, something small, something symbolic that means
could be anything. Right. Well, you know what? If you don't want to spend money on yourself, write something to yourself. Write a letter to yourself.
Yeah, I love
Do
that.
something to you. For yourself.
Yeah, like the thing with codependence is always a recognition from the outside that's being wanted. Yeah. But what would it be like if we could recognize those parts within ourselves, like where we validate ourselves, where we have that good self-talk? Like I love that. I remember one time I was in Burma on a meditation retreat, and it was like this very rigorous sort of old school 60-day silent retreat, and we couldn't even look at the flowers. We had to be in. And I remember this one day, it was these beautiful chrysanthemums or something. I could smell them, and it was like the 40-day, and I'm walking there real slow to the dinner hall, and I could smell it. And I looked, I couldn't help it. I had to look over the damn thing, and then it was like a lookout tower. It was very militant, and he went, "Put your head down." And in that moment, I felt so hurt and so sad. And then in that moment, I wrote myself a song that said, "I am enough just the way I am." Nice. And that's my prayer for you guys. It's just like, in those moments where you feel like shit, sing that song. What's your song? Sing that song. So I kind of feel emotional about that, because that was a moment that I could have collapsed, and with that positive sort of heartfelt self-talk, something else happened that's still sitting with me today, maybe 6, 7 years later. So that's my prayer for all of you. Love yourselves, find that song, slow down, check in. And you know what? We just, I don't know what to say. I'm still moved by what I just felt there a moment ago. So.
I got you. I feel you. I got you. Yeah. But again, we don't need to repeat ourselves. You already know. The only thing here is find the courage to do it. Find the courage to do it. Make the first step, and you will feel better. We guarantee it.
Okay, man, that's beautiful. And we're going to be back online over the Christmas, so we hope to be here at another time next week. We're still working out some interesting cats to come on, and we do recommend, for those of you who do like or have got some benefit from this, please like, share, or subscribe. And please, any of you who are struggling, write in something that you'd like us to talk about. Something that, reach out, send us a message. If you want to contact George, send us a message. If you want to contact me or any of our other therapists, please reach out. You don't have to be alone, and your voice really matters. And if there's a topic you want to hear, please, we would love to help you with that, because this is what it's about. It's about destigmatizing mental health and allowing there to be a sort of openness around the subject of all that big umbrella of mental health. So again, thank you. Enjoy this day. Reach out. Don't be alone. And happy holidays. But we'll see you before the holidays as well. So take care. And brother,
that's it, man.
Thank you very much.